Some people enter your life quietly. No noise, no warning. They simply appear one day, and before you even realize what is happening, they have already changed something inside you. You do not know how it happened. You do not know when it started. You only know that the world feels different when they are around. And sometimes, the very person who changes you is also the person you are most afraid to trust. This is the story of Emeka and Sola. A story about wealth that meant nothing, a test that almost destroyed everything, and a love so rare that even the man who found it almost let it slip away forever. Sit back, relax, and let us begin. Emeka Osei was 36 years old, and by every measurement the world uses to define success, he had achieved it all. His company, Osei Holdings, operated across 4 countries in West Africa. He had properties in Lagos, Accra, and Abuja. He drove cars that most people only saw in magazines. He wore suits that cost more than some people earned in a year. And yet, every evening when the meetings ended and the office building emptied and the last of his staff drove home, Emeka sat alone in his large corner office on the 14th floor and felt something he could not explain to anyone. Emptiness. Not the kind that comes from hunger or boredom. The deep, quiet kind. The kind that sits in the chest like a stone and does not move no matter how much money you make or how many people praise your name. He had everything, and somehow it felt like nothing. People who knew Emeka from the outside world saw a confident man, powerful man, a man who walked into rooms and changed the energy simply by arriving. He spoke with authority. He made decisions quickly. He never appeared unsure of anything. But the people who truly knew him, his personal assistant Bola, his driver Chukwu, his childhood friend Rodamai, they knew a different side of Emeka. They knew that behind all the confidence was a man who had been deeply wounded. A man who had learned, through painful experience, that wealth has a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. And that the wrong kind of attention, when it comes dressed as love, is the most dangerous thing in the world. Her name was Chisholm. Emeka had met her 5 years before our story begins, at a business dinner in Lagos. She was beautiful and charming, and she said all the right things at all the right moments. She laughed at his jokes. She listened when he spoke. She made him feel seen in a way he had never felt before. He fell for her quickly. Too quickly, as he would later understand. Within 8 months he had introduced her to his family, bought her a car, moved her into one of his apartments, and begun planning a future with her. He thought she loved him. He believed it completely, and that belief was what made the betrayal so devastating when it finally came. One afternoon, Emeka returned from a business trip 2 days earlier than planned. He went straight to the apartment where Chisholm lived. He had brought flowers. He had been thinking about her the entire flight. But when he arrived and opened the door with his key, what he found destroyed something inside him that would take years to rebuild. She was not alone. The man with her was someone Emeka recognized immediately. A rival businessman who had been trying for years to get access to Osei Holdings' internal contracts. Later, when Emeka had his legal team investigate, they discovered that Chisholm had been sharing confidential business information with this man from almost the very beginning of their relationship. She had never loved Emeka. She had been sent to get close to him. Every moment, every smile, every tender word had been a performance, a carefully designed role she had been paid to play. Emeka did not shout that day. He did not break anything. He simply stood at the door, looked at both of them, turned around, and left. He drove himself home in silence. He sat in his house for 2 days and spoke to no one. And when he finally came out, he was different. Not broken, not bitter, but changed. A wall had gone up inside him. Quiet and invisible, but very real. From that day forward, Emeka Osei decided that no woman would ever get close enough to hurt him again. Not like that. Never again like that. For almost 4 years after Chisholm, Emeka kept his personal life completely empty. He focused entirely on work. The company grew. New deals were signed. New offices were opened. Awards were given. Speeches were made. And through all of it, Emeka smiled for cameras and shook hands at events and went home alone every single night. His mother called regularly, asking when he would settle down. His friend Rodamai teased him constantly about becoming an old lonely man. But Emeka always laughed it off and changed the topic. Until the afternoon, everything changed. Until the afternoon, he walked into a small roadside canteen near one of his construction sites in Ibadan and met a woman named Sola. He had not planned to stop there. His driver had taken a wrong turn while trying to avoid heavy traffic, and as they waited for the road to clear, Emeka noticed the small canteen on the side of the street. He stepped out to stretch his legs. The place was simple: plastic chairs and wooden tables under a low zinc roof. A generator hummed in the corner. The smell of pepper soup and fried plantain filled the air. A young woman moved between the tables with ease, taking orders, delivering food, laughing with customers as if every one of them was an old friend. She was wearing a plain yellow dress and a small head wrap. She was not dressed to impress anyone. She did not look like someone performing for an audience. She was simply herself, completely and effortlessly. And something about that stopped Emeka where he stood. He sat down and ordered food. The woman came to his table. Up close, her eyes were warm and steady. She had a calm about her that he found immediately unusual. Most people, when they recognized Emeka Ose, became nervous or overly eager. They wanted to impress him or ask him for something or simply tell others they had seen him. But this woman looked at him the way she looked at everyone else. Plainly, warmly, without any agenda. She set his food in front of him and said, "Enjoy your meal," and walked away without a second glance. And for a reason he could not immediately explain, Emeka felt something shift inside him. Something he had not felt in years. Curiosity. He came back to that canteen 3 times that week. The third time, he finally asked her name. "Sola," she said simply. "Just Sola?" he asked with a small smile. She looked at him with a slightly amused expression. "Is one name not enough for you?" she asked. He laughed. A real laugh. The kind that surprised even him because it had been so long. Her full name, he would later learn, was Sola Adewale. She was 29 years old. She had grown up in Ibadan, the second of 4 children. Her mother sold fabric in the market. Her father had passed away when she was 14. She had worked since she was a teenager to help her family, and she had eventually managed to start this small canteen on her own with money she had saved carefully over several years. She had no idea who Emeka was. She did not follow business news. She had no interest in the kind of world he came from. She only knew him as the quiet man who kept coming to her canteen and ordering the same pepper soup every time. They began talking. First, short conversations while he ate. Then longer ones when the afternoon crowd thinned out and she had a moment to sit. She was funny in a way that felt honest, not practiced. She asked him direct questions without being rude. She disagreed with him sometimes without apologizing for it. She had opinions and she expressed them simply and clearly. And Emeka, who had spent years surrounded by people who agreed with everything he said, found it completely refreshing. He began making excuses to go to Ibadan more often. His assistant Bola noticed the pattern and raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Rodamai noticed too and said plenty. "You are smiling differently," his friend told him one evening over the phone. Emeka denied it, but Rodamai knew him too well. "Something has changed about you," Rodamai said. "Who is she?" Over the next 2 months, Emeka visited Sola regularly. He never arrived in his best car. He always came simply dressed. He had told her he worked in business but never specified what kind or how large. And Sola, who was not the type to chase such details, never pressed him. To her, he was simply Emeka, a quiet, thoughtful man who liked her pepper soup and made her laugh and listened when she talked. She liked him. She could feel that clearly. But she was also careful. She had been hurt before by someone who had not been honest with her. A man she had trusted who had eventually shown her that his intentions were never genuine. She had rebuilt herself slowly after that, and she was not in a hurry to open up again without reason. But Emeka gave her reasons. Small ones. Consistent ones. He remembered details she mentioned in passing. He asked about her mother and her siblings by name. When her generator broke down and affected business for 3 days, he showed up with a technician he said was a friend who owed him a favor. He never made her feel small or beneath him. He treated her like someone whose time mattered, whose thoughts mattered, whose life mattered. And slowly, carefully, Sola began to open her heart to him. It was not dramatic. It was quiet and steady, like the turning of a season. But it was real. For Emeka, what he felt for Sola was unlike anything he had experienced before. Even with Chisholm, what he had felt was partly tied to excitement and novelty. With Sola, it was different. It was grounded. It felt like standing on solid earth after years of trying not to sink. But the wall inside him had not completely come down. The memory of Chisholm lived in a quiet corner of his heart, and every time he felt himself getting closer to Sola, that memory whispered the same question. How do you know she is real? How do you know this is not another performance? How do you know that if she found out who you truly are, she would not change completely? It was Rodamai who first suggested the idea. The two men were sitting together one evening in Emeka's house in Lagos when Emeka told him about Sola. Rodamai listened carefully, asked a few questions, then leaned back in his chair and said something that planted a seed. If you want to know if she is genuine, he said slowly, show her the worst version of your circumstances and see if she stays. Emeka looked at him. What do you mean? Rodamai shrugged. You know what I mean, he said. You have that old property your uncle left behind in Agodi. The one you have never renovated. Take her there. Let her see what she thinks is your real life. See how she responds. Emeka was quiet for a long moment. That feels wrong, he said finally. Rodamai nodded. Yes, he agreed. But losing another 4 years of your life to the wrong person would feel worse. Emeka did not decide immediately. He thought about it for 2 weeks. He argued with himself constantly. One part of him felt that testing Sola was unfair. She had done nothing to deserve suspicion. She had been nothing but genuine from the first day. But another part of him, the part that still carried the wound from Chisholm, could not fully let go. He had thought Chisholm was genuine too. He had been completely certain. And he had been completely wrong. So after 2 weeks of internal battle, Emeka made a decision he would come to both regret and be grateful for at the same time. He decided to show Sola the old house in Agodi. Not as a test, he told himself. Simply to understand her heart more clearly. The old house in Agodi was a property his late uncle had owned for decades. It was located in a quiet, low-income area of Ibadan. The house itself was worn down by time. The paint on the walls had faded and cracked. The wooden window frames had swollen and warped from years of rain. The zinc roof was rusted in several places and leaked when the rain was heavy. The compound was overgrown. 2 small rooms served as the living space. An outdoor bathroom stood at the back. The house had no furniture apart from an old mattress, a wooden bench, and a small table with an unsteady leg. It looked like the home of someone who had been struggling for a very long time, which is exactly why Emeka chose it. He told Sola he wanted to take her somewhere important. He said there was something he wanted to show her. He said it with a calm voice, but his heart was beating with the weight of what he was doing. Sola agreed without hesitation. She told her younger sister to watch the canteen for the afternoon, and she got into Emeka's modest car, the one he always used when visiting her, and they drove through the streets of Ibadan together. When the car stopped in front of the old house, Sola looked through the window for a moment without speaking. The street was narrow. Chickens moved across the compound next door. A group of children played in the dust not far away. An old woman sat outside a nearby building fanning herself slowly. Sola looked at all of it quietly. Then she turned to Emeka. Is this where you live? She asked. Her voice was steady. No judgment in it. Just the question itself. Emeka looked ahead through the windscreen for a moment. Then he nodded. Yes, he said quietly. This is where I stay when I am in Ibadan. Sola looked at the house again. Okay, she said simply. Let us go inside. They stepped out of the car. Emeka unlocked the old door. It groaned as it opened. They stepped inside. The room was dim. The air inside was still and warm. The cracked walls, the bare floor, the old mattress pushed against one wall, the wooden bench, everything was exactly as he had left it. Sola stood in the middle of the room and looked around slowly. Emeka watched her face with quiet intensity. He studied every expression, every flicker of reaction, waiting for the moment he had seen before. The shift. The change. The moment when a person's true feelings about poverty and struggle reveal themselves through their eyes before their mouth can form a polite excuse. But Sola's face did not shift in the way he expected. She looked around the room with the same calm steadiness she brought to everything. Then she walked to the wooden bench and sat on it. She pressed her hands flat against the surface, feeling the texture of the old wood. She looked at the wall beside her. She looked at the ceiling. Then she looked at Emeka. "How long have you been staying here?" she asked. He paused. "A few years," he replied carefully. Sola nodded slowly. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that immediately unsettled him. "This bench needs fixing," she said. "If you sit on it the wrong way, it will collapse." She shifted slightly and pointed to one of the legs. "You see this leg here? It is loose. You need to nail it properly before someone falls." Emeka stared at her. Of all the things she could have said in that moment, he had not expected that. She stood up and began moving slowly around the room. She noticed the wall where the plaster had fallen off. She noticed the window frame that had separated from the wall. She noticed the ceiling where a water stain marked an old leak. She was not looking at the room the way someone looks at a place they want to escape. She was looking at it the way someone looks at a problem they are already thinking about how to solve. Emeka could not fully understand what he was witnessing. "Is this not too difficult?" he finally asked carefully. She turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" He gestured around the room. "Living like this, is it not hard?" Sola looked at him for a moment. Then she said something he would remember for the rest of his life. "Emeka," she said simply, "I grew up in a house smaller than this one. My mother raised 4 children in 2 rooms with a shared bathroom across the yard. We ate 1 full meal a day for 3 years after my father died." She paused. "I know what difficulty looks like. And I also know that difficulty does not define a person. What defines a person is what they do while they are in the difficult place." She looked around the room once more. "You have kept this place clean. You have managed. That tells me something about you." Emeka stood very still. A strange feeling was moving through his chest. Something between relief and shame. Relief because she was not running. Shame because he knew the truth she did not. They stayed in the house for a while longer. Sola walked to the small window and pushed it open carefully to let in some air. Then she turned back to the room and said quietly, "When you are ready, we can clean this place up a little. Make it more comfortable. It does not need to be expensive to feel like a home." Emeka looked at her. She was not offering because she felt sorry for him. She was not performing generosity for his benefit. She was simply being herself, practical and warm and present. And something about that broke through a layer of the wall inside him that had been standing for 4 years. They left the house later that afternoon. On the drive back, they were quieter than usual, but it was a comfortable quiet. The kind that exists between 2 people who have shared something real. When they arrived at the canteen, Sola stepped out of the car and turned to him. "Thank you for showing me," she said. He nodded. She looked at him for a moment longer. "Whatever you are carrying, Emeka," she said gently, "you do not have to carry it alone." Then she smiled and went inside. Emeka sat in the car for several minutes after she disappeared through the door. His hands rested on the steering wheel. Outside, the street moved on with its ordinary afternoon noise. And inside Emeka's chest, something he had locked away a long time ago was very slowly beginning to loosen. In the weeks that followed, Emeka and Sola grew even closer. She began keeping a small meal aside for him on the evenings he visited. He brought her books she mentioned wanting to read. They took walks through different parts of Ibadan on her days off. They sat together quietly sometimes without needing to fill the silence with words. It was the most natural thing Emeka had ever experienced with another person. And that naturalness terrified him, because every day that passed without telling her the truth made the deception feel heavier. His assistant Bola had begun to notice his mood. "You seem different lately," Bola told him one morning. "Different good or different bad?" Emeka asked. "Both," she replied honestly. Emeka looked at her. "There is someone," he said simply. Bola raised her eyebrows. "Does she know who you are?" she asked. He shook his head. Bola was quiet for a moment. Then she said carefully, Sir, that kind of secret has an expiry date. Emeka said nothing, but he knew she was right. The situation became more complicated one afternoon when Emeka's business partner Tund visited the Abadan site and insisted on getting lunch nearby. Emeka's driver, trying to be helpful, suggested the canteen he had seen his boss visit multiple times. And so, without planning it, Emeka found himself walking into Sola's canteen with Tund, who was loud and talkative and had no filter whatsoever. Sola came to take their order. She greeted Emeka warmly. Tund, who was already looking around the small canteen with polite but visible curiosity, looked between them with sharp eyes. "You two know each other?" he asked. Sola smiled. "He is a regular," she said. Tund looked at Emeka with an expression that said everything. Emeka looked back at him with an expression that said be quiet. Tund managed to hold himself together through the meal, but the moment they were back in the car, he turned to Emeka with wide eyes. "She has no idea who you are," he said. It was not a question. Emeka stared forward. "No," he said. Tund was quiet for a moment. Then he said something surprising. "Good," he said. Emeka turned to look at him. "You have never looked more relaxed in your life," Tund said simply. "Whatever this is, do not ruin it too quickly." But the universe had its own timing for when things would change. And that timing came on a Thursday afternoon, 6 weeks after the visit to the old house in Agodi. Emeka was in Lagos for 2 days handling a critical acquisition meeting. He had told Sola he would be away briefly for work and would call when he could. The meeting ran long, and by the time it ended it was late evening. He called her. She answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded different, a little flat, a little distant. He asked if she was all right. She said yes. He asked again. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Someone came to the canteen today asking about you." Emeka sat up straight. "Who?" he asked. "A man," she said. "He said he was your business associate. He was asking how long you had been coming here. He mentioned the name of your company. He said Ose Holdings." The silence on the phone lasted several seconds. Emeka's mind moved fast. Someone had come to ask about him. Someone who knew his name and his company. Someone who had tracked him to a small canteen in Ibadan. This was not accidental. He kept his voice steady. "What did you say to him?" he asked. "I told him I did not know anything about any company," she said. "I said you were just someone who ate here sometimes." Another silence. Then her voice came again, quieter this time. "Emeka, is there something you have not told me?" Everything about that moment told him the time had come. He had planned to tell her properly. He had imagined a quiet evening, a calm setting, a careful and considered conversation. But life had decided not to give him that. "Tell me tomorrow," he said. "In person. Please." She was quiet for a moment. "All right," she said finally. "Tomorrow then." That night, Emeka did not sleep. He lay in his bed in the Lagos house, which was large and well-furnished and completely unlike the old room in Agodi, and he stared at the ceiling and thought about every moment with Sola, every conversation, every time she had been completely honest with him while he had been something less than completely honest with her. He thought about how she had sat on that old bench in the worn-down room and pointed out the loose leg and told him to fix it before someone fell. He thought about how she had said difficulty does not define a person. He thought about the way she had said, "Whatever you are carrying, you do not have to carry it alone." And he felt, for the first time with complete clarity, the full weight of what he had done. The next morning he drove to Ibadan early. He arrived at the canteen before it opened. Sola was inside doing the morning preparation. She heard his knock and opened the door. She looked at him for a moment without speaking. Then she stepped aside to let him in. They sat across from each other at one of the wooden tables. The canteen was quiet around them. Through the window, the street was just beginning to wake up. Emeka put both his hands flat on the table. He took a breath. Then he told her everything. He started from the beginning. He told her about Chisholm, about the betrayal, about the 4 years he spent building walls instead of connections. He told her about his company and what it was and how large it was. He told her about the house in Agodi, that it was not his real home, that he had taken her there deliberately to see how she would respond. He told her about his properties and his cars and the life he had hidden from her completely. He told her all of it plainly and without excuses. And when he was done, the canteen was very quiet. Sola had not moved throughout his entire explanation. She sat across from him with her hands folded on the table and her eyes steady on his face. When he finished, she did not speak immediately. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked back at him. And the expression on her face was not what he expected. He had prepared himself for anger. He had prepared himself for tears or raised voices or words thrown like stones. He had not prepared himself for what he actually saw. Something calm and deeply serious. The expression of someone who is thinking very carefully before speaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and measured. So the whole time, she said slowly, every visit, every conversation, every moment you spent in my canteen, you were deciding whether I was genuine enough to deserve your truth. Emeka opened his mouth to clarify, but she continued. I am not asking a question, she said. I am saying out loud what happened so that we both understand it clearly. She paused. You watched me. You assessed me. You brought me to a house that was not your home and watched my reaction as if I were someone sitting an examination. Another pause. And you never told me any of it. The words were not shouted. They were not delivered with visible fury. But each one landed with precision and weight. Emeka felt each one. I know, he said quietly. I know how wrong it was. Sola looked at him. Here is what I need you to understand, she said carefully. It was not the poverty that would have pushed me away. She gestured slightly with her hand. You already know that. What would have pushed me away is what you just showed me right now. Dishonesty. The assumption that I needed to be tested like a product being checked before purchase. She took a breath. I have worked hard my entire life to be a person of integrity. And the man I was beginning to trust decided, without telling me, to make me the subject of an experiment. Emeka felt the full force of her words settle on him. You are right, he said. I had no right. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you here this morning? She asked. To be honest, he said. At last. To ask for your forgiveness. And to tell you that what I feel for you is real. Every single part of it. Sola was quiet again. She looked out of the window at the street. A woman walked past carrying a basket on her head. A motorbike honked in the distance. The morning was fully awake now. Then Sola looked back at him. She said nothing for several seconds. Then she stood up slowly. I need you to leave, she said. Not forever. But for now. I need time to think about this properly. Because right now I have too many feelings in one place and I refuse to make an important decision when my thoughts are not clear. Emeka stood up. He nodded. He picked up his car keys from the table. He walked to the door. Then he stopped and turned back. Sola, he said. She looked at him. I am sorry, he said. Genuinely. For all of it. She held his gaze. I heard you, she replied. Then he left. The days that followed were the longest Emeka had experienced in years. He returned to Lagos. He sat through meetings. He signed papers. He answered calls. And through all of it, a part of his mind never left Ibadan. Never left a small canteen on a side street where a woman in a yellow dress had once looked at him without any agenda and made him feel something he thought he had permanently lost. He called her once, 3 days after their conversation. The phone rang and she did not answer. He did not call again. He understood she needed the space she had asked for and he owed her at least that much. His mother called him that week for their regular conversation and heard something unusual in his voice. What happened? She asked immediately. His mother had always been perceptive. He told her a shortened version of the story. His mother listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised him. You have always been very intelligent, my son, she said. But intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. Intelligence helped you build your company. But this situation required wisdom. And wisdom would have told you that love cannot be tested into existence. Can only be recognized and received. He held the phone and said nothing. She continued. The question is not whether she is the right person. Sounds like you already know she is. The question is whether you are willing to do what is necessary to deserve her trust again. Emeka closed his eyes. I am, he said. Then show her that, his mother said simply. Not with words. With action. The action came from an unexpected direction. One evening, about 10 days after Emeka had left the canteen, Sola received a call from her younger sister Kemi, who watched the canteen on days off. Kemi's voice was urgent. Sister, something is happening at the canteen, she said. What do you mean? Sola asked, immediately alert. There are people here, Kemi said. A big truck. Some men. They say they are here to fix the roof. Sola felt her heart quicken. What? She grabbed her things and went quickly to the canteen. When she arrived, she found a small team of workers already assessing the leaking section of the zinc roof that had been causing problems for months. A man in a blue work shirt who appeared to be in charge came to speak to her. He handed her a document. The job order had been paid for in full. When she looked at the name at the bottom of the form, she stood very still. Emeka Ose. She called him. He answered immediately. Why did you do this? She asked. Her voice was not angry. It was searching. Because you mentioned once that the roof leaks when it rains and it disrupts business for the whole day, he said. I am not trying to buy your forgiveness. I want to make that clear. I just did not want you to lose another day of business to a leaking roof when it was something I could easily fix. There was silence on the line. Then she said something quietly that he almost missed. You remembered that. He had mentioned it only once, many weeks ago, as a passing frustration during one of their conversations. He had stored it without thinking about it. Of course I remembered, he said. Another silence followed. Then Sola spoke again. Come to Ibadan on Saturday, she said. He paused. Are you sure? He asked. She replied without hesitation. Yes, I am sure. I have finished thinking. And I have something to say to you. Saturday came slowly for Emeka. He drove to Ibadan himself without his driver, the way he always had when visiting her, and arrived at the canteen in the late afternoon when the lunch crowd had thinned. Sola was behind the counter. She saw him come in and nodded toward the corner table, the one they had always used. He sat down. She brought 2 bottles of cold water, set one in front of him and sat across from him. She looked at him for a moment. He waited. I spent 10 days thinking about everything, she said. I was angry for the first few days. Not about the wealth. She was clear about that, her hand moving slightly to emphasize the point. The wealth means nothing to me either way. I was angry because I felt like you looked at me and saw a question mark instead of a person. Like instead of simply knowing me, you needed to verify me. Emeka nodded. That is exactly what I did, he said quietly. And it was wrong. She held his gaze. She agreed. But I also spent time thinking about why. And I think I understand, even if I do not excuse it. She paused. You were hurt very badly by someone who came close to you through dishonesty. And so when you found something real, you were afraid. Not because you wanted to be unfair to me, but because you did not know how else to protect yourself from being destroyed again. Emeka looked at her. The accuracy of her understanding moved through him deeply. That is exactly it, he said. She nodded slowly. I know, she said. And that is why I am still sitting across from you right now instead of asking you to leave. She leaned forward slightly. But I need you to hear me clearly, Emeka. If we continue from here, there will be no more tests. No more experiments. No more watching me from a distance to decide if I am worthy. You either trust me or you do not. And if you do not, then we both deserve better than a relationship built on surveillance. He did not hesitate. I trust you, he said. She looked at him steadily. Even now, after everything he had done, the answer was immediate and certain. Even now, he said. Especially now. Something shifted in her expression. The careful steadiness softened slightly. She looked down at the water bottle in front of her for a moment. Then she looked back at him. She said, when you were in that old house in Agodi, and I looked around the room and started thinking about how to fix things, do you know what I was actually thinking? He shook his head slowly. I was thinking that if this is where you are right now, then this is where we start from, she said. Not where we end. She looked at him directly. I was not staying because I thought there was nothing better available. I was staying because I was already in. Emeka felt something break open quietly in his chest. All that time, he said softly. You had already decided. She nodded. I had already decided, she said simply. They talked for 2 hours that afternoon at the corner table in the small canteen, while the street outside moved through its ordinary rhythms. They talked about everything that had been unsaid. About his life and her life and the ways their worlds were different and the ways that did not matter as much as people would assume. He told her about growing up in wealth and the loneliness it sometimes carried. She told him about growing up without and the strength it had quietly built in her. He told her about his company and what it actually meant in terms of responsibility and pressure. She told him about her plans for the canteen and the small restaurant she had always dreamed of opening one day. They talked the way people talk when they have stopped hiding. Fully and without apology. When the evening finally came and the canteen needed to close, Sola stood up and began clearing the tables. Emeka stood too and helped her without being asked. They worked side by side in comfortable quiet. When everything was done and the canteen was locked, they stood outside in the early night air. The street was softer in the evening. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing music at a low volume. Sola looked at him. What happens now? She asked. He looked back at her. Now we go forward, he said. Together. Honestly. She studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. Together and honestly. She repeated. Good. In the months that followed, everything changed and nothing changed. Sola met Emeka's mother on a quiet Saturday afternoon at his family home in Lagos. His mother opened the front door herself, which was unusual, and when she saw Sola she smiled in a way that said she had already heard enough to form a clear opinion. She held Sola's hand for a moment when they greeted and said, You look like someone who does not pretend. Sola looked at her warmly. I try not to, she replied. Emeka's mother looked briefly at her son. I like her, she said simply. Emeka suppressed a smile. Rodamai met Sola at a small dinner Emeka arranged and spent the entire evening trying to get her to laugh, which she did easily and genuinely, and afterward he pulled Emeka aside and said, This one is different. You know that, right? I know, Emeka said. Good, Rodamai replied. Then stop doing things to ruin it. Sola, for her part, navigated Emeka's world with a quiet steadiness that never became either intimidated or impressed. She moved through his spaces with the same calm she brought to everything. She asked questions without pretending she already knew the answers. She did not perform comfort she did not feel, but neither did she allow unfamiliarity to make her smaller than she was. The people in Emeka's world noticed this. His business partner Tund told him after a company dinner where Sola had attended, She is the only person I have ever seen make you look nervous. He said it as a compliment. Emeka visited the canteen every time he came to Ibadan. He still came in the modest car. He still sat at the corner table. He still ordered the pepper soup, though now she teased him about his loyalty to one dish when she had 12 other options available. He invested in the canteen's expansion quietly, not as a gift but as a proper business arrangement with documents drawn up and reviewed by her own lawyer, a young woman Sola trusted from her neighborhood. Sola refused anything that was not structured properly. I did not come this far by accepting charity, she told him firmly when he first suggested helping. He respected that completely and made sure everything was done on her terms. The restaurant she had always dreamed of slowly began to take shape. A proper space, properly planned, properly hers. Emeka was part of the process as someone who listened and supported and offered resources when she asked for them, never as someone who took over or directed or diminished her ownership of the vision. And watching her work, watching her move through the planning and the details and the challenges with the same practical steady energy she brought to everything, Emeka understood something that settled into him like a final piece finding its place. This was the woman. Not because she had passed a test. Not because of what she had said or done in an old room in Agodi. But because of who she simply was, every ordinary day without effort or performance. Completely and quietly herself. On a warm evening 10 months after they had first sat down at the corner table for their honest conversation, Emeka took Sola to a quiet spot on the outskirts of Ibadan that overlooked a valley. The sun was setting. The sky was burning softly in orange and deep pink. They sat on a mat he had spread on the ground, the way she preferred, with food she had packed herself because she never trusted anyone else's pepper soup, and they sat quietly together watching the evening settle over the hills. After a long, comfortable silence, Emeka shifted and reached into the pocket of his Agodi. He brought out a small velvet box. Sola looked at it. Then she looked at him. He opened it. A ring sat inside, simple and beautiful. He did not make a speech. He had thought about what he wanted to say for weeks, and in the end he decided that the simplest words were the truest. Sola, he said, I spent 4 years building walls and calling it wisdom. Then I walked into your canteen and everything I had decided about the world stopped making sense. He looked at her. You are the most honest person I have ever known. Not because you never struggled or never doubted, but because you face everything without pretending it is something other than what it is. He paused. I want to spend my life being honest with you, the way you have always been with me, even when I did not deserve it. He held the box out to her. Will you marry me? Sola looked at the ring for a moment. Then she looked at him. Then she did something that surprised him completely. She laughed. Not from nerves. Not from discomfort. A real laugh, warm and full. The kind she had when something genuinely moved her. Then she said, the first day you came to my canteen, I thought you were just another man who could not find a good place to eat. He smiled. And? She looked at him with steady, warm eyes. And then you kept coming back, she said. She reached out and took the box from his hand. She looked at the ring for a moment. Then she looked at him. Yes, Emeka, she said simply. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at the valley below them where the last light was fading slowly into a deep blue evening. They sat together in the quiet after that, her hand in his, watching the world settle into night. No performance. No test. No wall between them. Just two people who had found their way to the same honest place and decided, without condition, to stay. The wedding happened on a clear Saturday morning in Ibadan. Sola had insisted on Ibadan. This is my city, she said simply, and Emeka had agreed without argument because she was right and because he had learned by then that when Sola was right, the wisest thing in the world was simply to agree. The hall was filled with her family and his family and the people from the neighborhood who had known her since she was a girl carrying fabric for her mother at the market. Old friends and business partners and the regular customers from the canteen, who could not believe the quiet woman who cooked their afternoon meals was marrying someone whose name they had seen in business newspapers. Her mother sat in the front row in a beautifully embroidered Ankara dress that Emeka had quietly arranged to be made for her by a designer in Lagos without Sola knowing. When Sola saw her mother in it, she stopped walking and pressed her hand to her chest. Then she looked at Emeka, who was already standing at the front waiting for her, and she shook her head slightly with a smile that said she understood exactly who had arranged it. He smiled back. Rodamai stood beside him and leaned slightly toward him. I told you, Rodamai said quietly. Emeka did not look away from Sola as she walked toward him. Yes, he said. You did. When they exchanged their vows, Sola looked directly at him and said her words without reading from any paper. She had memorized them because she said she wanted them to come from her face, not from a page. She said, I am not here because of what you have or where you came from. I am here because of who you are when you stop hiding. And I am here to remind you, every day if necessary, that who you are is more than enough. Emeka held her hands through all of it. And when she finished, he realized his eyes were full. He had not expected that. Rodamai noticed and turned away politely. His mother noticed and pressed her handkerchief to her own eyes. Later, at the reception, when the food was served, Emeka noticed that Sola had arranged for pepper soup to be one of the main dishes. He caught her eye across the room. She raised her glass slightly with a small smile. He shook his head with a quiet laugh. She knew him. She had known him from the very beginning, perhaps even before he had known himself. And that, he thought, as the music rose and the room filled with laughter and the evening opened up in front of them full of warmth and possibility, that was the most extraordinary thing of all. Not the wealth, not the test, not the revelation or the reconciliation or the ring on a hillside at sunset. But this, a woman who saw him clearly from the very start and chose him anyway. And a man who finally, after a very long time, let himself be seen. My wonderful viewers, there are people in this world who will love you not because of what you have, but because of who you are. The challenge is learning to recognize them when they appear and having the courage to be honest enough to deserve them. What did you think about Emeka and Sola's story? Do you think Emeka was right to test her, or did he go too far? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. A brand new story is coming very soon, so make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss it. If the story moved you, please like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you so much for watching.